Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to server-side web development. This is lecture 7. Today, what we're going to be covering is Laravel. So we're moving on from just our plain PHP and MySQL, and we're going to learn about the Laravel framework. Now, this is going to be we're going to be spending basically the rest of the term just covering the different components of Laravel. For today, we'll get an introduction to Laravel. I'll just talk about it briefly about what it is and why we're learning it. And then we'll cover Laravel roots and Laravel views. And this will just be kind of a general information. We'll be continuing to learn about these topics as well as new topics with Laravel. So that's what we're covering today. But before we get started, are there any questions? All right, doesn't sound like there's any questions. So let's go ahead and jump right into Laravel. All right, so Laravel is a free open source PHP framework. It is also probably, arguably, the most popular PHP framework out there today. It is one of the newer ones, and from the start, it grew in popularity very, very quickly. It is built on object-oriented PHP. So we're going to be when we work with Laravel, just like what we did with PDO, where we were working with objects and instances, and we had that special object-oriented syntax. We're going to be doing the same thing with Laravel because again, it is also built on object-oriented PHP. Now, we don't necessarily need to understand how object-oriented programming works to use Laravel. That's the beauty of it. Uh, Laravel also follows the Model View Controller or MVC architecture pattern. So what this means is that we'll be splitting up our application into 3 different parts. The model being the data, that's mostly the database. The view is what gets shown to the user in the browser, and the controller is sort of the brain of the operation. That's where all our logic will go. So when we're building our applications in Laravel, we'll be focusing on the 3 divisions here. Today, we're going to be focusing on the view. So we'll do routes and view, which is both part of the view part. Then we'll talk about the controller and the model as well and how they all work together. Laravel also supports routing, handling models, views, the controller, and authentication. So all of this gets built into this framework, and Laravel has made it very easy to tap into all this, so that you have to actually write very little code to get any of this working. Now we will hit on all of these topics throughout the remainder of this course. We'll also be talking about the Blade template engine. We'll be discussing that today as well. The Blade templating engine allows us to create basically PHP templates using the Blade kind of syntax, which is a more friendly, slimmed down version of PHP. And then there's also the Artisan CLI, which is how we'll use that to run certain commands and to build certain aspects of Laravel. Again, we'll be covering all of that throughout the course. All right, and the last thing is that the latest version of Laravel is Laravel 7. So if you're installing a new version of Laravel, you're going to be using Laravel 7. All of the documentation on the course website is for Laravel 6. Now, that might sound pretty out of date, but with the jump to 7, Laravel changed their numbering system. So Laravel 7 is more like Laravel 6.1. It's not a very big leap, and many of the changes that were made in Laravel 7 won't really impact us at all because they're more advanced features that we're not even going to be covering. There is the hybrid assignment, which we'll be talking about later, is actually the title is Laravel 5, and that might even sound even more behind the times. But the course, although they didn't change the name, is set up for Laravel 6. And again, it's covering very basic things about Laravel, which really hasn't changed much at all in the last several versions. So even though we have multiple different versions floating around here with Laravel, basically they're all the same for what we're working with. Just to keep that in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and move to our next topic, which is installing Laravel. Now, if we were meeting in person, I would actually take some time and we would install this together. But I'm just going to go over some brief explanation on how we can install Laravel. And then if you haven't already installed Laravel, you'll have to do that on your own time. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, oops, that's not the right way. There we go. We're going to look at the course website. And on the course website, we do have instructions on how to install Laravel. So here is the website. So I'm just going to go to content, and I'm going to go to week 8. That's the week we're on right now. And right here in topics, we have the installing Laravel for macOS and installing Laravel for Windows. Now, these will link to the page for the development that we did, the installation of the development tools at the beginning of term. These are those, is just pointing to those pages. So you may have already done this if you followed all the way through. But I'm just going to show you that as a refresher. So on the macOS side, to install Laravel, we'll be using Composer to install the Laravel installer. And again, you'll just open up your terminal, you'll run that command, and this will take a while. And then once that's done, you'll have the Laravel installer. From there, we will go to our sites folder. And to actually create a new Laravel site, we would do Laravel new, and then the name of the site that you want to create. Now, if you follow these instructions, you should have a Laravel folder that contains the default code for a Laravel site. And that means you will be able to go to this URL, laravel.test, and you should see a screen similar to this one right here. Again, that's assuming you have followed these instructions, which were available at the beginning of the term. All right, so that is very straightforward how the Mac OS version works. Now, for the Windows version, it is using Laragon. And with Laragon, it actually has it's part of their quick app system. So in the menu, you have this quick app menu item, and then you can just go to Laravel. And this will automatically install Laravel for you. And when you provide it with a name, so for example, you provide it with the name Laravel, it will create a database as well to match the project name, so that you will have a database that will be available for this project. And again, you will use the same URL as the Mac version. So you use Laravel test to see the Laravel welcome page. All right, so again, that's just a kind of an overview of how to install Laravel. If you have not done that already, I recommend you do that on your own time. Both options do not take very long, assuming that you have everything set up properly. All right, I know that was kind of quick. Are there any questions about installing Laravel? Or has anyone who attempted to install Laravel had problems?
I have a quick question. For
Yes.
Mac users, we don't need to install do anything for the database setting for the Laravel.
No, not to install Laravel right off the bat. I'll explain how we would connect to the database a little bit later today.
Okay.
All right, so again, if you haven't attempted to install Laravel, if you don't have Laravel installed yet or a Laravel project installed yet, I do recommend you do that so that you can follow along in future lectures. With that said, the final project, which is Task Manager, which I won't talk about today, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, it will have a different set of instructions for installing for that project because it's a little bit different. I have videos available for walking through how to install those. I don't have them posted on the website yet, but I'll get them up when we're to that point. Just a heads up on that. It will be slightly different than your basic Laravel installation. All right, so once you've got Laravel installed, the next logical step that you'll want to look at is roots. So that's what we're going to be discussing next. So rooting is one of the most fundamental features of Laravel. It allows us to create friendly URLs for our site. So for example, if we wanted to create these friendly URLs that will take us to different pages or have different, if you remember, we were working with like get variables where we pass a variable through the URL. Well, we can convert that to kind of a friendly URL scheme that would allow us to kind of create this natural looking URLs. And Laravel does that for us automatically. All we have to do is set up how we want them to be rooted. And it's really, really, really powerful. All right, so to use to use roots, we would need to define them inside of the web.php file, inside of the roots folder. Now I'm going to go through the Laravel project here in a moment, and I'll kind of explain where this file is and where you can find it. Now all roots will start with the root class, and we'll call a static method. Now that static method will match the HTTP verbs. Now we talked, it's up there in that second bullet, HTTP verbs refer to how we want to make that call. Now if we're doing a get call, now remember a get call is anytime you type something through the URL, you're making a get request. That would be the name of the method we would call, the get method. If we're doing a post call, we would call the post method. Now there's many other ones that exist out there as well. We have put, we have delete, we have patch. These are all different HTTP verbs that we can use. And we'll talk about those in more detail later on in the course. Now each method will take a URI that is a path that we want to link towards that, to that root, as well as a function. Now that function will execute when the URI path is seen or is in the browser. Okay, this all makes sense once I go through a demonstration, which I will here in a moment. So the URI path is what is entered into the browser. So for example, if we're using our Laravel test, say if we wanted to go to the welcome page, we might do laravel.test/welcome. That would be the URI. And if inside our roots we have one that matches that URI, then it would execute that function. Now the returned value of the function for our roots is what will be displayed in the browser. So if we were to simply just have a return string of hello world, all that we would see in the browser is the term hello world. Now, in addition to the function, inside the function, we can also point to view. The view function will allow us to point to view files. And we'll talk about view files again a little bit later, but they're a way of making more complex displays or views to be displayed in the browser. Now, view files are typically blade templates, and they will be stored in the resources/views folder. Again, I'll go through this, demonstrate where that is here in a moment. All right, so let's start looking at some of this code because bullets don't really give you the full explanation of what's going on here. All right, so right now what we're looking at are two roots that would appear inside of our roots/web.php folder. Now inside of this root folder, you will see that there's multiple files, not just web.php, but in this course, we will only be using web.php. We won't worry about the other files. All right, so we have two roots here. They're both using the get method. So notice that here is our method, which matches the HTTP verb, and we're both using get. That means this is something that would be typed through the browser, and it's going to be passed using the get protocol. So for the first one, we have just a slash. This is the home page of our site. So just a slash would be the home page. And you notice we'll call a function here and we're returning a string hello world. And that's it. So if we were to go to the home page of our site, which had this root, all we would see on the page is the string hello world. Now in the next root, we have slash welcome. And this is so if we were to go again to our site, say laravel.test/welcome, this root would take over. And for its return statement, we're using a view and it's view welcome. Now, this is a shorthand for the file welcome.blade.php. Okay, this is a shorthand for that. So Laravel is very smart with these shorthands. It knows that if you type in welcome, you might be looking for either a .php or a .blade, and it's going to look for that. So all we have to do is just the first part. So it's going to load whatever's in this file and display it in the browser. And we'll take a look at that because this is an actual file in our project. All right, so you know what? I'm going to stop here and I'm going to start demonstrating some of this in actual code before we continue on with our roots. So I'm going to jump over here. Now I've already got my Laravel project installed and I have it loaded here inside of VS Code. So I'm just going to walk through what a Laravel project would look like because if you've opened this up, you'll see that there are lots and lots of files in here. And it can get easy to get lost in the number of files. So I'm just going to explain the folders that we're going to be dealing with and which ones you need to pay attention to. So I'm just going to start at the top here. So at the very top, if you have your folders being listed first, we have an app folder. Now, the app folder is where our models, which is right here, we have a user model, and our controllers, which are inside this HTTP controllers, will exist. All right, so that is where the app folder will become important because it's where we'll keep our controllers and our models. Now, I'm not going to go into much more detail because we'll discuss controllers and models later on. The next one, you can just skip Bootstrap and config. We won't really be using either one of those. But I'm going to jump into database. Now, database will come into play because of this migrations folder. Now, the way migrations work is that if you remember back when we were discussing MySQL and databases, and I warned you about the update and delete commands, they can cause damage to your database and there's no undo. Well, that is what Laravel is trying to accomplish with migrations. What migrations allow us to do is to quickly build and kind of maintain a database, have a kind of an undo button, so to speak, because we'll have all this SQL data being stored inside of this migration. It's not in SQL, it's in its own little language. It's in PHP, but it's all set up so that Laravel can build a database from scratch just by running these migrations. And so if something goes wrong with our database, we just have to run the migration and we're back up and running. Very, very nice. We will be using migrations just a little bit to get you set up on some projects for this course. I'll give you some migration files and you'll run the migration command and that will create the database for you. All right, so the next one is the public folder. We really won't be doing much with the public folder at all, but this is the main folder that users will see. When you type in the site laravel.test, this is the folder it's pointing to because it's going to hit this index.php file and it's going to handle everything that our site's going to do. So the user doesn't actually hit any other part of our project except for this file. From this file, everything is done. But again, we won't be really doing anything directly with the public folder. The next folder is our resources folder. Now, the resources folder is where we would have different aspects of our site. So we could have our uncompiled JavaScript and uncompiled Sass files here, as well as our views. Now, remember, our views are what allow us what is going to be seen to the user in the browser. If you open up the views folder, if you have your project created, you can see that we have this welcome.blade.php file. This is a Blade template, and it has a mix of HTML and Blade syntax, which is going to display that welcome page that we see when we load our project in the browser. Okay, we'll take a look at that welcome.php page in more detail here in a moment. After resources, we have the roots folder. Now, this is roots folder is where our roots will go. This is what we were just discussing. And right here is the web.php file. And this is where we would create our roots. Now, by default, Laravel adds one root for us already. You can see that here's the root class and calling the get method. It's hitting the index, the root page for our site, and it's pointing to that welcome page, view page for us. And that's what we're seeing. So, right, let me see. Apologize, I've lost my I've lost my stuff. Okay, so let me just open up the page. So if I were to go to Laravel test, place, type that right. There it goes. Okay, so here is that welcome page. So this is the main page of the site, and that is what we're seeing. That's what this is pointing to, and it is hitting that Laravel welcome page inside of the views right here. That's this page. And again, we'll take a look at this in a little bit more detail. All right, so continuing on from roots, these next folders, storage, test, and vendor, we will not be working with in this course. Those are for some more advanced features of using Laravel. And then beyond that, the rest of this is all just kind of necessary files for making Laravel work. The only one I want to point out is this .env file. This is your environmental file, and this is sort of like a settings file for your site. This is what makes, this is what gives us the ability to set up our site on different servers that might have different requirements or different setups as well. So the main part of the env file that we're going to be changing is the database connection. So that's around line 9 to 14. That's this group right here is all about the database. So if we were changing our database, or if we want to set up our Laravel project to point to a specific database, this is where we would do it. And you can see that we have different parts here. So we have the type of database we're connecting to, MySQL. We have our host and port, which will be 127.0.0.1 is localhost. So we would just, if we're working locally, that's what we would use. Our database is set up on the port 3306. That's the standard port for the MySQL database. So these will all generally keep the same for this course. But the next ones could change. So the first one is the database name. Now, by default, it's set to Laravel. But if we're using a different database, say the Movie Mayhem database or the Sociology database, then we would want to change this to point to that database. And then we would need to update the username as well as the password so that it matches. All right, so in a nutshell, that is sort of the files that we would be working with for the Laravel project. Now, let's go ahead and jump back to our roots and let's start playing around with some roots. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just comment this out right here. This is our root pointing to that welcome page. And I am just going to create a new root and try to demonstrate what that would look like. So we would create a new root here, again, starting with the root class, and then we call the method that we want. Now, right now, we're just going to be working with get, but we could also use post or put or delete. These are all possible functions that we could be using for our root. But for now, we're just going to use get. Get is probably the one you're going to be using the most anyway. So from here, we'll do get, and then we'll do slash. We're just going to point to the home page. And I'm going to create that function. Now we're doing an anonymous function here, so no function name, and we're just passing it to this get method. Now, whatever returns from this function is what will be displayed in the browser. So again, if we just do a return hello world like that, then what we should see is a hello world. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'll go back to my page here, jump back, actually rearrange this. Okay, so now, right now, this is the welcome page. So if I refresh though, you can see right at the top, we have just hello world. And again, that's because all my function is returning now is hello world. Of course, we can change this to be something else. Let's say hello class. Again, it's a different string, and that will be updated when I refresh the page. Now with the view right here, this was setting up with the view. So I'm going to change this that I commented out. And rather than pointing to just the root page, I'm going to give it its own little directory, so to speak. So I'm going to do /welcome. So this one's just slash, and I'm going to do /welcome right here. And I'll save it. Now, when I save it, this page won't change at all. But we will have, because this is still the home page, but if I were to change my URL, let's see here, laravel.test/welcome, and hit enter. Oops, I think I probably typed it wrong. I do apologize. I can't actually see what I'm typing here, so sometimes it's a little hard for me to, there we go. Just gonna have to decrease my screen. There we go. Forgot my E. And there we go. So now we get back to that welcome page. And that is because inside of our root, we added the /welcome to our root for the URI. And then inside of our function, we're returning that welcome view. All right, so any questions about how roots are working so far? We're going to talk about some other things we can do with roots.
I have a question about the slash. It's kind of like a placeholder, like indicates the, for example, the index.php, and we're gonna put anything there, and they're gonna be shown in the page.
Yeah, so yes, you pretty much can put anything for your URI. You wouldn't necessarily put index.php. Just note that that slash is the same as index.php. And remember that these are friendly URLs, so it's not quite the same. There's a lot going on in the backend to make this all work, because obviously we don't have a directory called welcome. So what PHP and Laravel are doing is it's looking at the URI that's coming in, parsing it, and determining that, oh, /welcome means that I should call this function, which should load the welcome page.
Okay, got it.
And that's sort of how it works. There's a lot, again, I used to teach how we would do this manually with PHP, but Laravel does it so well, there's really little need to have to learn it manually. Any other questions? All right, so let's go ahead and move forward with our roots. So in addition to just displaying data, you can also pass data to a view uh, using associative arrays. So our view that we saw, the welcome view, is pretty much static. Whatever was displayed inside of that template is what we see, but we can actually pass data to that view uh, if we want or if we need to. The associative array will be the second argument in that view function. So remember that we had that view function that had uh, just one string in it, which was welcome. Well, we can add a second parameter to that, which would be an array, and that's the data that gets passed to it. The data is accessible in the view as variables, as the same name as as the key. All right, so let's take a look at an example. So this one looks very similar to what we were working at just a moment ago. So here's our root with the get variable, and here we're calling that welcome page. Then we have our function, and we're returning the view welcome. But we're not stopping there. We're adding a comma, and then we're adding an associative array. So note that we have the key of name with the value of John inside of this array. Then inside of our welcome blade.view, we could do hello, and then using just regular PHP, we could do echo name. Now, name here exists because of this name key up here, right? So Laravel is automatically taking these keys and creating PHP variables for us so that we can use it. Now, there is another way of doing this. That is using standard PHP, but if we wanted to use the blade syntax, we could do it this way. So instead of doing that echo statement, we can just use the double curly brace mustache syntax. For those of you who are in web production, you'll notice this is the same syntax that we use inside of Vue. This is actually a very popular syntax. So we do the same thing with Laravel Blade, and this will echo out name and return John. All right, so that is passing data to views. Now we have also root parameters. So this is allowing us to kind of add data to the URI or look for data that's being passed through the URL. Okay, so root parameters allow for segments of the URI to be essentially variables. The root parameter is passed to the callback function. That's that function that we write for the root, and we would have access to that variable to be used inside the function. Now, these root parameters can be required or optional. We can set that up when we define our root. So let's take a look at this. So let's say we were working on a blog and we want to have we have a post page, and that post will have different IDs or slugs associated with it. So if we wanted to set up the root like that, we could do root get, and then we have /post. So all of our posts will exist in this /post sort of virtual directory. And then right here is our root parameter. So we're just putting inside of a single curly brace, we're putting in post. So post our variable, which we'll use inside of our function right here. So $post. That will be used inside of here. And we will then be able to access whatever value got passed in here. So this is kind of a sort of a wild card, so to speak. So if I were to put in /post post-1, then our post variable here would be post-1, and I would be able to get information from this array. And then we could use the view to return that post. So again, this is sort of a way of making our UIs more dynamic and allowing them to be flexible and change based off of different values that are being passed to it. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're going to go back to our code and we'll take a look at this a little bit more. So right now we have our roots here. So we have our roots for hello class and our welcome. So let's go ahead and let's pass some data to our view, our welcome view right here. So I'm going to add an array after welcome here. So I'm going to do, we'll just do the name like our slides had. So I'm just going to do name. We'll just do John right there. So we're doing an associative array, and it comes as the second parameter of the view, right? So I'm going to save that. And if we come here and we refresh our page, we're not going to see any different, because even though that data is being passed to the view isn't using it. So let's go back here and let's jump to our welcome.blade.view here. So right here is this page. And right now there's a lot of extra stuff at the top here to style it. But what I'm most concerned about is that big Laravel title right here. So that's what we're seeing here. I'm going to change that. So I'm going to change this to be hello, and I want it to be output the name that we pass to it. So I'm going to use it because this is a Blade template. So that's where the blade.php comes in. I can use the Blade mustache syntax to output name. So I'm going to do it like that. So hello, name. And so whatever that name that's being passed there will update or will be presented. So I'm going to save that. I'll jump back to my page. I'll refresh here. And we can now see that it says hello, John. And this John, again, is coming from our root. So let me actually start doing it this way. It's coming from our root right here. So right here. So if I were to change John to say, let's say Michael, and we'll save it, then that value, because that value changed, our view will change as well. Now you can, obviously this is an array, so you can pass a lot more data here than just this. So say we want to pass in an intro, and this can be, so I am a professor, like that. And then we can save this. We'll go back to our welcome view. And we can add that here. So I'm going to add like paragraph tag, and I'll just output intro. Come back to our page, we'll refresh, and then we can see that intro is being appeared. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's how we can pass data to our page. Now, this is a very simple way of doing it, and this is great for simple sites. But as we get to more complex sites, especially sites that are going to be working off a database, we'll learn about different ways we can use the roots and the views to display data dynamically. All right, so that is, again, sending data to the views. But let's go ahead and take a look at how we can alter or add that URL parameter. So I'm going to do this in our main root here. I'm going to add a URL parameter to this. So let's say we want to make a movie site, right? And we want that if the user types in the movie title, then it would display the movie. Now we don't have anything set up yet for the databases, so we're just going to kind of fake it. So I'm going to add a parameter here, a URI parameter, root parameter, and I'm just going to do it again, single curly brace, and we'll just put movie. Okay, so whatever gets typed in here is going to be saved to a variable that gets passed to the function. So I'm going to create a parameter here so I have access to that value, movie, and now I'm going to return whatever that movie is. So right there, I'm just going to return that value. So I'll save that, and we'll go back, and I'm just going to bring this down so I can see what I'm typing. And we'll just go back to our root here at laravel.test. Okay, so now the reason why we're getting a 404 here, this is important. So the reason why we're getting a 404 is that in our root parameter right here, we are requiring that movie be presented. And since it's not there, we get this 404. So if we wanted to fix that, we would have to also include a root for that as well. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to add another root. Get. We're going to add the slash. We'll add the function. For this one, I'm just going to do return welcome to movie mayhem. Okay, like that. So now we'll save that. Refresh. Oh, let's see what I forget. Oh, forgot a semicolon at the end there. Don't want to forget your semicolons when you're working with PHP. Okay, so there we go. We got our site. So here's our welcome to Movie Mayhem. Now, if I were to add a slash and then I can type in whatever I wanted right here, right? So I could type in The Godfather, right? I can hit enter. And what it's going to do is, oh, yeah, that happens sometimes. This is part of the problem with having your URL also be your search. Google tends to take over sometimes. So a way to fix that, by the way, if that happens, is just make sure you type in the HTTP at the beginning, and then Google doesn't take over. All right, so here we go. We have The Godfather, and we can see that The Godfather is showing up. And if we were to change this to something else, say, wow, I'm drawing blanks. Let's say Jaws. It's another movie, we get Jaws, right? So whatever we get typed in here will get sent to that movies variable and then gets displayed onto our page, right? And in a nutshell, that's sort of how roots work. Now we're going to be using roots a lot more, and we'll learn about how we can do other things with the roots. We're not done with roots after this lecture. We're going to be adding on to it moving forward. But are there any questions about roots?
Yes. You mentioned we have to create a separate root tag so that it goes to the root and it does not break. Correct? Is
Correct.
there a way the movie parameter can be optional and not
Yeah,
write the
yes, there
additional
is.
root?
There is a way to make it optional. And I am so sorry. I am drawing a blank on what we need to do for that. I will have to look that up and we will get back to that. But yes, so there is a way of making that optional so that we wouldn't have to include it. You know what? Let's just look it up. This is a good way to demonstrate where we need to go. So for documentation on Laravel, the first place you should go is the Laravel site. So that's laravel.com. That gives you to the official Laravel site. And then we can go to the documentation, and this is where all the documentation is, and it is very well documented. The best place you can go to get started, that will explain how you install everything. Now, their installation process might be different than what I've shown you because I've customized our installation to make it simple. But if you're looking at once you have it installed and you want to just get started, going to the basics is the best place to get started. And you can see right at the first part is rooting. So this is where we would see everything that we're discussing about rooting, redirect roots, view roots. Here's the required parameters, and here's our optional parameters. So if we go here, we can see this is where we would create our optional parameters. So we can see that adding a question mark, you can also do this by adding question mark, which would make the parameter optional. So now if we go back here and we add that question mark to our movies, and we'll just comment this out. We'll save it. And we can go back to our JAWS. Here we can refresh. We can see that JAWS is still working, but if I were to remove JAWS and just have it plain. Oh, it's too few arguments. That's because we're actually using movie here, and it's not
It
finding it.
should be null.
Yeah.
Function
So
movie equal to null.
yeah. So what we want to do is what happens when I do things on the fly. Oh yeah, we need to have a default. So if we default this to null, there we go. I'm gonna refresh. There we go. And we get nothing, which is what we would expect because we're sending essentially null. We could actually change this to be welcome to movie mayhem. We'll save that. We'll refresh. And there we go. Okay, so if no movie is passed, we'll get that welcome to movie mayhem. And then you wouldn't have to create this second root. But most often, very rarely, and this is why I didn't remember, because very rarely do you actually create optional parameters. Most of the time, you will be expecting something because you'll be loading a different view in that instance. So you would have this root as well as your home root, because these would actually be displaying two very different things. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so let's go ahead and officially talk about Laravel views. We've already been touching on it with the roots, but let's go talk about them in detail. All right, so the Laravel views follow, again, Laravel follows the model view controller architecture. We've talked about that already. And MVC provides a separation of tasks between the data, which is the model, the interface, the user interface, which is the view, and the logic, which is the controller. Now, none of these, or the model and the view, do not communicate directly to each other. The model will send its data to the controller will process it, and then will send the processed data to the view. So the controller kind of serves as a go-between between the model and the view. And again, the reason why we do this is it allows us to change out any part of the model view controller structure. We can pull out, say we want to change our database. Well, we can pull that out and not affect the view and the controller. They will still function with a new data. They're not directly tied to that specific data. This allows our project to be more flexible. The whole model view controller architecture is very popular in web applications and web development. So views are what gets displayed in the browser. We've already seen this. We've talked about it. And they are being stored in the resources views directory, which I showed you earlier. Now, views can be in both PHP or Blades files. Now, we didn't see that. We just saw the Blades files, but you can just use standard PHP for your views as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the Blade syntax or the Blade templating engine, because we will be using it throughout this course. So the Blade is a PHP templating engine that is included in Laravel, and it is quite powerful. And basically what it does is it allows us to write PHP-like syntax that is simpler and more friendly to use in with our HTML. Like I said, Blade includes multiple statements and directives which simplify creating a template. And many of the Blades, we can use PHP tags, by the way, and functions with Blade. Another popular templating engine is called Twig. And that one, the way it's written, doesn't allow you to do that, doesn't allow you to use PHP directly in the template, but Blade does. Because what happens is Blade will be transpiled into PHP before it gets sent or gets compiled by the PHP compilers. So that's what makes Blade a little bit different, is that everything we write in Blade will be converted to PHP. Which is the next thing. So it gets compiled to plain PHP. So let's take a look at some Blade. We've already seen some already, but here's an example of Blade. Again, we have just standard HTML right here, and we have a hello name, right, using the mustache double curly brace syntax. And this is the same as saying echo name. But we don't have to add that open and closing PHP tags. We don't have to have the echo statement. This is just much cleaner and easier to read. Now, Blade does provide control structures that mimics its PHP counterpart, meaning that it has if statements, if else statements, it has for loops and for each loops. So if we wanted to use our if statements, they would look like this. So in all of PHP's directives start with the @ symbol. So here we have @if, @else end if. So these are all directives that we can use, and they are conditional statements, obviously, allowing us to conditionally display HTML. Then we also have our loops. So we have our for loops and we have our for each loops. And they work just like they do in PHP. So let's see some examples of this. So for example, for our if statement, if we wanted to check to see if name has a value before we display it, we can do if @if, and then we can use the isSet. This is just a plain isSet PHP function, which we can use. And then if it is, this is true, then we'll output name. Else, we're going to output hello guest. Then we'll end the if statement with the end if. Now notice that we don't have to worry about semicolons. We don't have to worry about curly braces or PHP tags. That's what makes Blade simpler and easier to read. Now we want to take a look at the for loop and the for each loop. For the for loop, again, we'll have those three parts just like the for in PHP. So here we're just looping 10 times, and it's just going to output its value. Notice we do @ for and then we end for. So you do have to remember, anytime you use a directive, you're going to have the end version of it to close it up. For our for each, we'll use it to iterate over an array. So say if we had a list of items, again, we start with the array first, and then we do as the value, which will hold each item, and then we can display each one. Okay, and that's pretty much the way using the control statements in Blades works. All right, so in addition to your control structure, Blades also provides a sort of a way of creating master layout pages. Pages which will serve as a template for other layout pages. And we have a couple directives which allow us to do that. The first one is a section directive, which defines the section of content. So what we'll do is we'll have say we want to make a section of our page, which is dynamic depending on the template's use of it. Well, we would declare that with a section name, and then that can be used by the child template. The yield directive is then used to display content that is given to a section. The show directive is used to end the defined section and display the section at the same time. So it sort of serves as the same as yield, but it works slightly different. So we're going to see an example of that. So right here is an example of what a parent or master layout would look like. So we have this yield statement here for title. So this allows us to output content for that title. And here is the section. So we're creating a sidebar section right here. And this is going to be what is going to be displayed for any template that's going to use this template or extend it. And then we have this show, which is going to show whatever else gets passed to it. And then we have this other yield right here, which is going to be for content. All right, so this is what the master would look like, or the parent template would look like. Then we could create a child template which would extend from the parent. So here we have the extend directive specifies which layout should be inherited. So we'll use that extend directive to state that, hey, I want to extend this parent template. The section directive is used to inject new content into whatever section that we have that's been set up on the parent template. We'll end it with the end section directive. And then the parent directive will include the parent's content with the child's content. So if we take a look at the example here, so this is the child template that is going to be used and it's going to inherit it. So it's going to extend the layouts.app. So layouts here, by the way, the reason why we're writing it this way is this is assuming that our views are inside, or this app view is inside of the layouts folder. So we do layouts.app is kind of a shorthand. Again, Laravel will set it up so it does the slash and point to the correct folder. So here's the extends, and then we have this section. So we have section title, and we're going to set its value to page title. And then we have our section sidebar. Now we have this at parent. This is going to grab whatever the parent's value is that's inside of sidebar first, and then it's going to add our own template to it. So you can see that it appends this master sidebar. Then we have our content, and this is going to add content to that section. So if you remember what that looked like, so here is that master or parent template. You can see that right here is the yield title, which is being set up here as well. So then we'll have the page title. Then we have the sidebar, right? The sidebar section, which is being set up, which the child is updating here. So it's grabbing that section sidebar and it's adding its own content. Now it's going to grab the parent content first and then add the new content below. And then we have this yield content, which again allows us to set up a kind of a section where the, where the child can then add its own content. All right, so I know templates inside of Laravel and inside the Blade can get really confusing. We're going to go through it a little bit in the hands-on, but we're already running later than I would like, so I'm going to run through this quickly. But just note that we won't be using templates all that much in this course, but they are really, really helpful and really powerful to use if you're going to be using Blade a lot when building your applications. Okay, let's go ahead and, jump back over to our code here. And I want to, we want to update our movie mayhem here. And we're going to set this up so that we can, with some new Blade template. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my views here, my view folder. I'm going to create a new file inside of this. And I'm just going to call it movie.blade.php. And for this, now this is a Blade template, but I'm just going to create some HTML to start. I'm just going to use a basic structure. Oh, okay. So yeah, I guess Emmet doesn't really work on this, so I'm just going to have to create this by hand. Just adding title here. This will be the movie. We'll do an H1. I'll put movie again. Okay, so right here, HTML. Okay, so this is very, very basic template. We're just setting up so that the title has whatever value the movie is, and the H1 has the value of the movie. All right, so then we will go back to our root, so our web.php, and we will update our movie view here. So we'll leave this alone, but we're going to change the return statement here. We're going to change it to point to that view we just created. So we'll do view.movie and with slash, and then we'll send the movie there. Now it does need to be an array. So we'll do it with a value of movie, and we'll set it equal to movie. So this will create that movie variable inside of the view with the value of our movie parameter. We'll add our semicolon, don't want to forget that. And we'll save this. Then we can go back to our browser. We'll refresh. And we didn't see much of a change, but we can see that this did get changed to an H1 instead of just plain text. And this is because we're not sending any movie across. But then if I change this to, say, The Godfather again, we can see that once it loads, it's going to display The Godfather. Okay, so that's sort of as in a very, very simple way how the Laravel views work. We'll spend some more time with this next week when we start adding some more content as well. But I don't want to run much over an hour, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But are there any questions about our views or about anything we covered today?
So are final going to be asked to use this technology?
Yes. So the final project, which we will talk about, I think we'll talk about next week. I think it's set up for next week. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be using Laravel to build a sort of a task manager application. So think of a to-do list application, but where you can have multiple lists. And what you'll be doing is you'll build it all into Laravel. It'll all work with a database. And you'll set up authentication. So you will set up so that multiple users can have their own, each have their own lists. Okay, so that's, again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, you will be using Laravel for the final project. So there's a request to see the code again. So right here this is the root code. Any other questions before we go to our assignments for this week? All right. Like I said, sorry that we did kind of rush at the end here for our Laravel, but we will have an opportunity to look more at roots and views through the rest of the course. We will be spending the rest of the weeks focusing on Laravel. So next week we'll be discussing controllers and a little bit of models. And then the following week we'll be discussing forms, how we can use forms to send data to our Laravel project and receive data from users. And then following that, we'll move on to authentication. All right, any final questions? Okay, so just gonna head back over to our slides and let's talk about our assignments. There's actually just one new assignment for this week, and that is hybrid number 4. This is your last hybrid assignment for the course. And what you're going to be doing for this assignment is you're going to watch the entire course of the Laravel 5 Essential Training. Now, again, it has Laravel 5 in its title, but it has been updated for Laravel 6. Laravel 7 just came out like a month ago or a couple months ago. So it's very, very new. And again, I looked at what changes they've made to it, and it's not going to affect anything we're working on. And in fact, everything that's in Laravel 5 is very similar to what's in Laravel 6. Very little has changed. So you're going to watch that entire course, and then you'll write 3 to 4 sentences about what you've learned about that course. Again, this will give you an opportunity to see a different way of learning Laravel. It goes through it a different approach than what we're covering here. And this is due August 5th. So you've got a little less than a month to complete that. All right, and again, that's the only new assignment for this week. For next time, what we're going to be covering next time is we'll be covering Laravel models. Now remember, models is our data, so we'll talk about how we set up Laravel to communicate with our database, and we'll talk about controllers. Now you have a huge list of assignments, outstanding assignments, which are going to be due. So tonight you have Sociology DB2, which is due tonight. So hopefully you've got that going and are almost finished with it. You also have your hybrid number 3, which is due tonight. So don't forget about that. Your Sociology midterm is due next week. So you just have a week left for that. And along with it, you have a midterm reflection. Again, you just talk about what you learned about completing the midterm. All right, so that's it. That's all I have. Are there any final questions before I let you go?
So for the midterm reflection, is it like, do we have to write a pseudocode, or it just has to be like an explanation?
No, just an explanation. This isn't really pseudocode. This is, so I provide you with some list of questions like, how did you complete it? What did you do? So
Okay.
I, used PHP, I researched this, if you ran into some problems, I ran into problems, I asked help from the TA, or I asked, or I looked it up, or I just did some more research, that type of thing. Just kind of explaining your process. It both helps me to see that you actually did the project, as well as just kind of, okay, well, I worked on this project and I see what I learned, type of thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so if there, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the midterm. I kind of finished it, but sometimes when I test it, the database doesn't work really well. But sometimes it works.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that after class in a little bit.
Okay.
More. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and let you go. I will be sticking around in case anybody does want to ask some additional questions. But if not, you're free to go, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.